In episode 3, June and Luke head back to the house, and they are pissed off on what they just witnessed. But one thing that June is really focused on was the color that Hannah was wearing. It was like this purplish plum color, and June is unfamiliar with it. She's concerned. She doesn't know what it means, and she's trying to think of a way to find out. She realizes she's got to talk to Nick. Nick would know. Nick was there. Moira says that there's a group near the border that's had luck with getting messages into Gilead. And June gets really upset that this is the first time she's hearing about this, but Moira tells her, these are the last people you need to be around. They're refugees with a death wish. They're just waiting to get caught. She does, however, agree to set up a meeting, not for June, but for Hannah. And the next day, she goes and meets with this girl named Lily in a parking lot along with June. Right away, Lily recognizes June. She thanks her because Lily's one of the girls that was traded for Waterford. It's pretty clear that this woman idolizes June. They then start talking about what kind of message they need to get in. Unfortunately, Nick really isn't the Jezebel's type, and that's where most of Lily's contacts are located. Not to worry, there are other ways, but it's going to take time. They head off to Lily's outpost, which is really a cabin in the middle of the woods near the border. There's a decent amount of people there, all armed, all with guns. Lily tells June that this is going to take a little bit. They can get around the Gilead services by using sat phones, but doing that and waiting for the message to trickle down to Nick, she might be there a while. When June and Moira enter the cabin, one of the things they're really impressed with is this wall of photos of all these women that they helped get out of Gilead. But Lily focuses on another wall with more pictures, and those are all the women who they didn't get out of Gilead, those who died trying to get out. As Moira and June are looking over the photos, Lily says, it's a shame, but those who are associated with Mayday know the risk. And this is a shock to June and Moira. They thought they made up Mayday. They thought Mayday was completely fake. And now they have a stranger telling them that, no, it's real. Lily goes on to explain that Mayday is everywhere. It can be as small as 1 or 2 people, and it can be as big as a couple hundred. She doesn't know where the other Mayday outposts are. It's just safer that way, but she has her inner circle, and that's Mayday. And when June tells her that she thought she made it up, Lily says, well, then it turns out you're Mayday too. Because they have so much downtime as they wait for Nick to get the message, they decide to help out. Moira and June start sewing some items into clothing that they're going to sneak over the border. In June's case, it's some arsenic that's going to go to a DC commander and hopefully it kills him. They then, though, stop because they hear a commotion outside, and it's a guy that looks like he's dressed up as an eye, and he's standing there screaming at the women that he's friendly, but they've got guns pointed at him and they're not so sure. On top of that, it's taking him a while to give them the password that indicates that he's friendly, until finally a woman pops up out of the woods and yells it. She explains to all of Mayday that this guy ended up saving her. He's a friend. This woman who had just escaped Gilead is taken in by the group, but the guy turns around to leave, and June says, wait, you're going back in? And he explains, yeah, I am. I have a wife and a kid. I can't abandon them. After that, everybody just turns in for the night, and June waits to hear from Nick. But in Gilead, June's former protege, Janine, isn't doing so hot. She's in the hospital, and she's unresponsive. So is Esther, but Aunt Lydia doesn't really care about Esther. She's more pissed off on what Esther did. So she doesn't care if she lives or dies, really. But Janine, she is very upset about. They've always had this weird relationship, and Aunt Lydia does not want to see Janine go. She starts praying to God, asking God to forgive any mistakes she made that led them to this point, and then she gets an idea, having Mrs. Putnam show up. Janine showing up at the hospital worked so well for the baby back in the day that maybe it'll do the same for Janine if her baby shows up. Mrs. Putnam, who always liked Janine, obliges, and she arrives at the hospital with the baby, and she starts talking to an unresponsive Janine that she won't be forgotten if she dies. That Mrs. Putnam will tell the baby where she got her smile from, where she got her kindness from, and she gets so close that the baby even touches Janine. And this appears to work, because the next day, Aunt Lydia goes to check on Janine, and she's out of her hospital bed. She woke up. She's still got a long road of recovery ahead of her, but she's much better than she was the previous day. While Janine is recovering, so is most of the country after the funeral for Fred. That whole song and dance was big for Gilead's PR department. The day after, Tuello goes to Serena's hotel room to meet with her, and he explains that the heads of Gilead must be very happy with her. She thanks Tuello because she does realize that Gilead looking good probably doesn't sit well with Tuello's bosses, but he says, "I'm just doing my job," and explains that allowing her to do this is kind of repayment for the botched prisoner exchange of Fred. She then tells him, though, that he should probably head out. She doesn't want anyone getting the wrong idea that he's there for other motives, i.e. spying. So he leaves and tells her that he'll be by later that day to pick her up and take her to Commander Lawrence's place. And he does just that, but when they arrive, Commander Lawrence tells them that they don't really take too kindly to spies, so he's going to have to sit outside and wait for Serena. Tuello completely understands and tells Lawrence, I do want to talk to you, though. I think we have a lot in common. To which Lawrence just cracks up laughing and closes the door in Tuello's face. The reason why Serena headed over to Lawrence's is because Lawrence is hosting a dinner. It'll be attended by Serena, the Mackenzies, who are Hannah's parents in Gilead, and Nick, who is with his new wife, Rose. And Rose is a very old family friend of the Mackenzies. Commander Mackenzie is friendly with Rose's dad, so they have a good relationship. But Nick showing up with a new wife is a surprise to Serena. She just had no idea about this. The group then sits down to eat, and after some pretty boring dinner conversation, they get into the topic of June Osborne. The Mackenzies are in agreement that June did not work alone. What Commander Mackenzie's heard is she actually had a lot of help in the matter. Serena's kind of surprised that the Mackenzies know all this information about Fred's death. She kind of thought it was tight-lipped, but apparently not. What the Mackenzies are worried about, though, is June, with the help of the American government, might be able to get to their family, i.e. Hannah. Commander Mackenzie and his wife start trashing June, saying how she's a monster, how she's a cancer they need to rid themselves of, unknowingly doing so in the presence of her baby daddy, Nick, and Commander Lawrence, who's helped her in the past. Luckily for everybody in attendance, though, the food finally arrives and they eat. As Nick is getting ready to leave, he heads outside and notices that Tuello is standing in a gazebo by himself. So he takes this opportunity to head over there and talk to him. He tells Tuello that he wants to be the one to tell June about Rose. Tuello is completely okay with that. His big concern is, has Nick given any thought to what he proposed? Nick working for the Americans. And Nick just tells him, yeah, man, it's not the right time for that. I can't. But this conversation is interrupted by Commander Mackenzie, who finds it really suspicious that Nick is having a conversation with Tuello in the first place. He tells Tuello that he wants to talk to Nick alone, and then explains to Nick how far back he goes with Rose's dad. And he would hate to think that Nick's fast rise in the Gilead government had to do with the fact that he married Rose. Nick denies any wrongdoing in this. He doesn't want Mackenzie thinking that he only married Rose for political gain. But as if he didn't have enough pressure on him already, now he's got Mackenzie, who is definitely on his ass. As Mackenzie and Nick were chatting outside, back inside, Serena sits down with Commander Lawrence. Lawrence looks down and sees Serena's finger, or lack thereof, and mentions how Fred shouldn't have done that. Fred was a weak-minded man. Serena agrees with all of it and admits that lately she's been thinking maybe it's a blessing that he died and he couldn't be here to raise her baby. The conversation then moves to something that was discussed over dinner. Lawrence mentioned how he doesn't plan on remarrying. And Mackenzie told Lawrence, we need to discuss that at the council meeting tomorrow, because a single man has no place in leadership. While it's callous, Serena knows that deep down, Mackenzie's right. An unmarried man in Gilead is going to have limited influence, and she knows that Lawrence doesn't want limited influence. He explains that marrying for power doesn't always work out well, and Serena says, well, it depends on the marriage. She's definitely hinting at Lawrence marrying her to stay in good favor with the Gilead government. She eventually, though, says her goodbyes and heads back to the hotel where Mark escorts her. Mark gets ready to leave, and she says, no, I need to talk to you. I'm staying in Gilead. Toronto isn't my home. This place is. Mark is really surprised by this. She's finally free, and she wants to go back. He knows it's not going to be safe for her. He reminds her that Gilead is not safe for women, especially if you're not married. But Serena completely disagrees and tells Mark, I don't think being unmarried is going to be my situation for very long. There's then a knock at the door, and a guy comes in and tells her that her attendance is requested at the commander meeting the next day. She RSVPs, and the next day, she's going to head to the council meeting, and Mark is going to head back to Toronto. And while all of Gilead is sleeping, the message to Nick finally arrives. He's able to get on a satellite phone and talk to June. June right away asks how Hannah's doing, and she's doing fine. She then asks what the color means, and he tells her it means that she's ready to be married off, which is horrible because she's not even close to being age appropriate for that. When June asks Nick if he can use his influence to kind of look out for her, he says no, because of the fact that he's remarried. He explains who Rose is and the fact that Rose knows all about June, and that June would even like Rose, but unfortunately for the time being, he's got to stay put. Right before he hangs up the phone, he explains that they're not going to be able to talk for a long time, and she needs to look out for herself. Commander Mackenzie is after her, and he's got power, so stay safe and make sure Nicole's safe. The next day, June heads back to Toronto, and while she's heading back, Serena heads to that council meeting. Right before it starts up, she runs into Commander Lawrence. She asks Lawrence, did you call this council meeting? Thinking that if he did, it's a sign that he is going to marry her, but he explains, no, I didn't. And that's when Lawrence realizes what's going on. He tells Serena, I really hope you didn't have any expectations of me. And while Serena says no, she absolutely did. And now she's nervous because she's wondering why exactly she was called. Council meeting then starts up, and she stands in front of all these commanders, and they explain that they don't really know exactly what to do with her. She's the legendary Serena Waterford. You're not going to make her a handmaid. So what they've decided to do is make her a quasi-ambassador. After the show that she put on for the world during Fred's funeral, they feel like they can use her as an influence to the rest of the world to show what kind of country Gilead really is. So they're going to send her back to Toronto. She's not happy about this. She wanted to stay in Gilead. She wanted to have some kind of influence on the country that she formed, but she also doesn't really have a choice. As Lawrence puts it, you're a peculiar woman, and this country just isn't built for your type. So reluctantly, Serena's going to have to agree. She does tell the council that she needs a staff, and she needs a lot of support in this matter, including security to help keep anybody that would get to her or her baby away, i.e. June. They understand, and they agree to all of it, but they end up sending her back to Toronto. Her disappointment, though, turns around when she arrives and she sees all the support that she's getting from strangers. She hops in a car, though, heading back to the detention center because right now they really don't have a place for her. But then there's a roadblock. Can't figure out what's going on and why this car is in the road and not moving. And that's when June Osborne comes out of nowhere, smacks her hand on the glass and says, "Never touch my daughter again." She just keeps repeating it until finally the car backs up and gets the hell out of there. But now that she's back in Toronto, Serena knows that June can pretty much get to her when she really wants to. And that might be Serena's biggest fear. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.